We're here at the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group on East Walnut. We're meeting with Rich Farnham and Ian Baring-Gould. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
So tell us about the genesis of the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group.
Rocky Mountain Rescue Group was basically started out of necessity. Back in 1947, there was a young girl who went missing. I believe it was in 4 Mile, but
I know it's in the foothills.
Yeah, here in Boulder, and unfortunately, she wandered away from her house and didn't survive. So the sheriff at that time kind of decided that there needed to be some type of organized response, a team of people within the community that would have training and would be able to go out and help people, whether it's a lost child or someone hurt here in Boulder, or close to Boulder, up in the Continental Divide, but people who are trained to actually go out and respond and look for folks. And that was the genesis of the group. He called a meeting at Boulder High back in 1947, and people showed up, and from that process, the rescue group was kind of formed.
And a lot of the techniques for what they started doing over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years had to be developed from scratch. 10th Mountain Division, I know, came up with some of those in the course of their operation, but tailoring it to this environment and also the different techniques that are needed around here, they basically had to make it up from scratch, build the gear from scratch. And again, that's where I think some of the university connection helped a lot. Over the years, we've had a lot of engineers and professors and people like that from the university, and done some testing over there as we developed our own equipment. So it was a great resource as they were developing.
Can you explain some of your search and rescue techniques? In other words, how do you get the ropes up there?
Sweat, blood, and tears. It's
a lot of physical work.
Yep. A lot of it is no different than what you would see in standard climbing. I mean, a lot of this is born out of the climbing tradition. And so you get the ropes up there by hiking around up to the top and finding a tree to sling your rope around, or climbing up the face and building an anchor, or driving a piton, or whatever you happen to do, whatever you happen to need to do to be able to access an injured party.
I think the key difference from a climbing mindset to a rescue mindset is that we prefer to go down rather than climb up. We'd rather take an easy way around the back and come down. So much of the gear is heavy. You don't want to be climbing up the face with a 40-pound litter and all these other things that you need to get in medical gear, oxygen tanks. It's much easier to take an easy path up the back and be lowered down the face, pick up the patient, and lower to the ground. There certainly are techniques. Take a place like Dream Canyon, for example, where the trail's at the top, or the Black Canyon is another example. We did a mission down there in the early 80s. Wow. There was about 1,200-foot cable uphaul out of the Black Canyon.
That's outrageous.
And so there is certainly ways to haul up rather than go down, but you're usually doing way more work when you can just let gravity work for you and take you to the ground.
Now, so sorry for cutting you off. Can I ask the obvious question? Why did not the agencies down there take care of it?
But Rocky Mountain Rescue has a very long history of excelling in kind of technical rescues, and a lot of that is because of the terrain that we live in. I mean, Boulder has some of the best climbing in the world, and therefore we're very experienced in steep rock, in exposure, and in things of that nature. So we find quite frequently that organizations in other parts of the state and other parts of the country who don't have that kind of expertise end up calling on those who do.
So what you offer is free. How do you get your funding?
We get our funding from a number of sources. Primarily, though, the key factor is we're an all-volunteer organization. So, in truth, our budgetary requirements are quite minimal. We operate on about $60,000 a year, and that covers everything.
It's not much.
No, it's quite small compared to other services you get in Boulder County. About half of that, kind of on average, comes from the county. So we have a contract under the Sheriff's Department to provide emergency search and rescue in Boulder County. Mm-hmm. We also get a little bit from the city to provide similar services, and then the rest comes from private donations. And so people, we're a nonprofit organization, and so people can make tax-deductible donations to Rocky Mountain Rescue Group, and that provides a solid portion of the funding for our organization. Another area that we get funding from is the DOLA fund. So your hiking license and your fishing license, there's a little chunk of that
And
that
your
goes up to a
climbing
fund.
license.
And your
Oh, wait a minute.
Don't you guys have a climbing card?
No,
I think what you're thinking of is the Colorado Search and Rescue card.
which is
What is that,
basically hiking. Basically, it's most of the money goes to fund environmental programs within the state of Colorado, but a small chunk of that goes into a search and rescue fund that primarily is there to help counties cover the extreme costs of search and rescue.
Now, you mentioned some of your special technique and gear. Can you tell us about it, please?
Sometimes it's based on an idea, maybe a commercially available product that we've looked at and said, this is sort of half of what we want, but it doesn't have this other feature that we might like, or we'd like it to behave slightly differently or be stronger or something like that. And we'll end up designing our own. A good example is our litter. There are commercially available litters, but we build our own. It's made from stainless steel. We had it built to our specs. It's a little bit bigger. It has solid steel on the sides. Makes it a little bit heavier than some of the commercially available ones, but it also provides excellent protection to the patient, which is something that we really like. We have a long tradition of testing as part of this design of gear, but also just testing something that comes off the shelf. If you buy a carabiner and the carabiner says brakes at 22 kilonewtons, we're going to take it out back to the drop tower.
You don't go down to the local rock shop and pick up a litter to be able to go and do that. We had to design and build things based on the needs that we saw in Boulder County. So the group developed its own gear and its own techniques because we had to do it, and there wasn't anything on the market. And that kind of culture of see a problem, develop a solution to the problem has existed, and I feel is one of the things that separates the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group from other rescue groups that have developed more recently, that you can go out and you pick up a fire catalog and you can go out and buy a litter and that kind of stuff, because those things have developed since the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group had kind of started.
So who are these rock jocks you were talking about, Rich?
Well, it's kind of a funny question, because in the Boulder area, it's hard to ever feel, you could be climbing at your best. I think on my best day ever, if I spent the next 10 years training, I would still barely rise above the level around here of being a beginner. I mean, there's just so many good climbers. We're not 513 climbers, we're just out climbing a lot and having fun. But we also spend a lot of our time doing rescue and training for rescue. And every now and then there's opportunities, like on the recent mission down in Eldo, the Dub Griffith accident. I thought it was an interesting call because it was a good example of how we're able to work with the climbing community when people are available and able to tie in. There were a couple of strong climbers right nearby the patient who were able to work with us and get a line in above us. It kept our folks, it was a tiny ledge right there at the patient. They were able to focus on the medical care and getting some of the gear up the wall to where they were, while these other climbers were available to get a fixed line a little bit higher and move around on the wall. So it was a good interaction.
You're listening to Assistant Group Leader Ian Baring-Gould and Rescue Support Rich Farnham of the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group. I'm Mike Brooks with ProRangeBouldering.com. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.